Hi guys, I'm Whitney of Sugar and Sparrow, and today I'm showing you how to make my favorite vanilla cake recipe. I created this recipe after tons of testing in hopes of developing the perfect from-scratch vanilla cake. The result is so light and fluffy, packed with vanilla flavor, and super easy to whip up. I hope you fall in love with it as much as I have. Let's get started by bringing all the dairy ingredients to room temperature. This is one of the biggest keys to success because these ingredients bond much better when they're room temp to create that light, fluffy crumb you're after. I've measured out 1 cup of unsalted butter, 3 whole eggs, a half cup of full fat sour cream, and 1 1/4 cups of whole milk. It's important to let these ingredients naturally reach room temp instead of microwaving them, so I let them sit out for about an hour before measuring out the dry ingredients. First, the cake flour. This recipe calls for sifted cake flour, which is much finer than all-purpose flour and plays a huge role in producing a tender crumb. I like to sift the cake flour right into a bowl on my kitchen scale to measure 290 grams of cake flour, which translates into 2 3/4 cups. And side note, if you don't have cake flour on hand, I do have a recipe for homemade cake flour linked below. It's basically all-purpose flour with cornstarch added and then sifted a bunch. Next, I add in the leavening agents, which are 2 1/4 teaspoons of baking powder and a half teaspoon of baking soda, followed by 1 1/2 teaspoons of kosher salt for flavor. I whisk all the dry ingredients together and set them aside. Now we can start whipping up that room temperature butter. I add it to my stand mixer with the paddle attachment and mix for about a minute on medium just to get it nice and creamy. I like to scrape down the bowl and paddle before adding 1 3/4 cups of white granulated sugar and creaming them together on medium for exactly 2 minutes, which is how long it takes to get the butter-sugar mixture light and fluffy. If you end up over mixing this part, it is one of the main culprits to why a cake will sink in the middle after baking it, and I'm actually working on a post that will discuss other reasons why this happens. But one of the best ways to ensure that your cakes bake perfectly with this recipe is to set a timer for 2 minutes while you're creaming the butter and sugar on medium to get them to that light and fluffy status. And if you've ever been confused by that term, here is what light and fluffy looks like. Now that the butter and sugar is perfectly creamed, I turn the mixer to low and add the eggs one at a time, making sure each egg is pretty well incorporated before adding the next. Then I add the sour cream, which gives this cake the perfect amount of moisture, and for flavoring, an entire tablespoon of vanilla extract. Then I turn the mixer to high for a full minute, and this is going to whip in just the right amount of air without going overboard. I like to add all of my dry ingredients on top of a sheet of parchment paper so that I can easily add them all at once to the mixer. By dry ingredients, I mean the cake flour, baking powder, baking soda, and salt mixture that we whisked together earlier in the video. With the mixer now on low, I'm adding all of the dry ingredients at once and wait until they just start to come together. Now that they've just started to come together, I'm adding the whole milk all at once in a steady stream. I let the mixer run on low for about 15 seconds after the milk is added, but no longer than that because we don't want to overmix the batter. At this point, I shake off the paddle attachment and give it just a few stirs with my spatula to make sure there are no major lumps or ribbons of flour. Now we can pour the batter into the cake pans, and these have been previously prepared by spraying the sides with cooking spray and placing a parchment paper circle into the bottom of each one. This recipe makes just enough for 3 6-inch layers, so I'm dividing the batter up evenly between these cake pans before baking them in a 350-degree oven for 30 to 35 minutes. And when they're done baking, they look like this. Perfectly baked and beautiful. And after frosting with my favorite vanilla buttercream recipe, which I will link below, this is vanilla cake perfection. Just look at this tender, fluffy crumb, and it's just bursting with vanilla flavor that I cannot wait for you to taste yourself. I hope it becomes your new favorite. Head to sugarandsparrow.com to find this vanilla cake recipe, decorating techniques, and so much more.